The genius of curiosity, Albert Einstein's inspirational journey. Welcome back to another episode of Legends and Lessons, where we explore the minds that change the world. I'm Alex.
And I'm Jordan. Today, we're diving into the life of one of the greatest scientific minds of all time, Albert Einstein. But we're not just talking about his theories. We're exploring his mindset, struggles, and the life lessons we can take from his journey.
Right. Einstein wasn't just a genius. He was a rebel, a dreamer, and a man who never stopped questioning the world around him. And that's something we can all learn from.
Absolutely. Let's start with young Albert. You know, there's this myth that Einstein was bad at school. People love to say, even Einstein failed math. But that's totally false.
Yeah, he was actually brilliant at math and science. But what did happen was that he didn't fit into the rigid school system of Germany in the late 1800s. He found it boring, too focused on memorization and discipline rather than creativity. He often clashed with teachers who preferred obedience over independent thinking.
That's such a common struggle, isn't it? How often do we see people who are incredibly smart but don't fit into traditional education?
Exactly. And Einstein's story tells us something important. Curiosity is more powerful than just following rules. He once said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." That curiosity led him to some of the biggest scientific breakthroughs of all time.
Speaking of breakthroughs, let's talk about one of his biggest, his theory of relativity. But let's not get too technical here. How would you explain it to someone who has no background in physics?
All right, imagine you're on a train moving really fast, and someone outside the train flashes a light. Depending on where you are and how fast you're moving, time and space actually work differently for you than for the person standing still. It's like reality bends depending on speed and gravity.
So basically, time isn't this fixed thing. It bends and stretches depending on speed and gravity?
Exactly. And that idea changed everything. It's why we have GPS, space travel equations, and even why time moves slightly slower on a satellite than it does here on Earth.
Mind-blowing. But let's rewind a bit. Before Einstein became the world's most famous scientist, he struggled to even get a job. After he graduated, he couldn't find a teaching position and ended up working at a patent office in Switzerland.
That's right. And you know what? That turned out to be a blessing. While working there, he had time to think. He would review patents by day and do theoretical physics by night. That's when he wrote his famous Annus Mirabilis papers in 1905, where he came up with the ideas that changed physics forever.
Let's break those down for a second. The Annus Mirabilis papers were 4 groundbreaking studies. One introduced the photoelectric effect, which led to the development of quantum mechanics. Another paper proved the existence of atoms by explaining Brownian motion. Then there was the special theory of relativity, which revolutionized our understanding of space and time. And finally, the famous equation, E equals mc squared.
E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. This tiny equation changed everything. It showed that mass and energy are interchangeable. That concept is the foundation of nuclear energy and, unfortunately, nuclear weapons too.
That's an interesting point. Einstein was a pacifist most of his life, but he had to grapple with the impact of his discoveries. He even wrote a letter to President Roosevelt warning about Nazi Germany's potential to develop atomic bombs. That letter led to the Manhattan Project, which created the first nuclear weapons.
And after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he deeply regretted it. He spent much of his later life advocating for peace and nuclear disarmament. He famously said, "I do not know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones."
That really puts things into perspective. But let's also talk about Einstein the person. Beyond science, he was incredibly wise. He had this almost childlike sense of wonder about the world.
Absolutely. One of his most famous quotes is, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." He believed that knowledge is limited to what we already know, but imagination has no bounds. It's what drives discovery and innovation.
And that's a lesson for all of us. Whether you're a scientist, an artist, or just someone trying to solve a problem, Imagination is key. Einstein believed that curiosity should never fade, no matter how old you are.
He was also deeply humanitarian. He spoke out against racism, supported civil rights movements, and even turned down the presidency of Israel.
Wait, he was offered the presidency of Israel?
Yep. In 1952, after the death of Israel's first president, they asked Einstein to take the role, but he declined, saying he wasn't suited for politics. He was a thinker, not a politician.
That's wild. He really was more than just a scientist. He was a philosopher, an activist, and a dreamer. And I think that's why he remains such an iconic figure.
Exactly. And if there's one lesson we can all take from Einstein, it's this: never stop being curious. Keep asking questions, keep imagining, and don't be afraid to think differently.
And maybe don't worry too much about failing a test or taking an unconventional path. After all, Einstein once said, "A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new."
Perfect way to wrap this up. That's all for today's episode of Legends and Lessons. If you enjoyed this, make sure to follow us and let us know. What's your favorite Einstein quote?
And remember, stay curious, stay creative, and keep learning. If you like the video, please do like, share, and subscribe and support me. See you next time.